Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending our presentation on exploring ways counties can develop conservation tools, incentives, and funding mechanisms. I will please ask you for any questions that you may have. Please enter those questions in the Q&A comment box, and a representative or a speaker will answer those questions as soon as they come in. To first start off our presentation, I would ask that we please play this video.
100 years ago, Hays County was known for its natural bounty, historic springs, and its stable population. It was hard to imagine places like the San Marcos Springs, or Jacob's Well, or people's drinking water being under threat. County leaders sought to attract new residents. Today, things have changed. Hays County is one of the fastest growing places in the United States, with a population of almost 250,000 people, nearly 16 times larger than 1920. Studies project the population to keep booming, adding the same number of people in the next 2 decades as it did in the last century.
The growth is here. It continues to happen. Hays County is one of the fastest growing counties in our state and nation, and so
that's why Hays County is hard at work with a team of experts and stakeholders to craft a set of conservation guidelines that will help chart a path for the county's future.
A conservation subdivision developer can reap the benefits of having the added value of the homes, the lot premiums of the homes near the open space, without spending much money at all on improving the open space. And the farm field remains as it is, the woodlands remain as they are, the wetlands remain as they are. One would put in some trails, maybe some recreational facilities for young people in the homes, but really very, very little expense goes into the open space. But the open space provides huge benefits economically through the lot premiums that they generate.
County leaders didn't want it to be a purely academic exercise, but something that would have a real grounding in market forces and real-world application. That's why the county's project team used real landowners and real condition.
We have a number of varied conservation easements here in Hays County, but throughout the state of Texas, we have conservation easements that are based off of percentages of overall land coverage, over impervious cover, over literally dozens of other requirements that are generally privately contracted on the front end. But what we're interested in, and the reason I was so interested in Mr. Aaron's comments, is the fact that we want to hear from you guys out there who are watching, because at the end of the day, we want to make this workable for our area and a means to an end. And whenever I say that, people move to our county because they like the culture and they like the overall conservation aspects of our county.
That's why the county's project team used real landowners and real conditions. Hays County instructed the project team to work with stakeholders, developers, environmentalists, regulators, and staff to make sure new rules would be workable and make immediate difference. Create incentives that would induce developers to use more creative approaches while still protecting and conserving county land.
People that move to the hill country today are moving here because they enjoy open space. And when they buy their home, they want to be able to have that view or to have that nature around them. And that's why they did it. They don't want to see someone's backyard. And so I think that if we can get developers to look at it this way, if we can get something on paper to show them, they will see that you don't have to develop every square foot of this acreage. And I know the acreage is expensive, and that's sort of the natural thing to do. But I think that they can find that they can do things less expensively. They can build the areas that are developed less expensively, and that there will be a huge market demand for that type of product, because that's why people move here. So it's a combination, I think, of changing the way development is looked at from the developer perspective, and then finding the tools that we have at our disposal at this time, and then looking at more creative ways to incentivize developers, and working with maybe even the state on some changes that would allow us to help them do these things, which we all know people are going to want.
The consultant team of planners, landscape architects, engineers, biologists, GIS specialists, and finance experts devised a program that included deep research on conservation development, stakeholder surveys, field trips, outreach with landowners and developers, virtual meetings, and a design charrette. After developing draft recommendations, the team held a mock charrette, or design workshop, to get those recommendations on 2 actual properties. On behalf of Hays County, We'll hope you take some time to look through this website, watch our live stream with conservation design expert Randall Arendt, and give us your thoughts and opinions. Thank you.
Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed that brief video highlighting the importance and feasibility of conservation efforts in Hays County. With that being said, I would like to introduce a few of the speakers that will be discussing several key points during this presentation. First off, I would like to start off with our Commissioner, Hays County Commissioner Precinct 3, Lon Shell, who will also briefly discuss that program that was just highlighted in the video.
Thanks, Marcus, and I appreciate everybody being with us today. Hope you're all having a good day, and want to welcome any comments, questions that you might have. Love to see your feedback as we go through this presentation, and hope that we can answer all of your questions. My name is Lon Shell. I'm a county commissioner in Hays County representing Precinct 3, which is western San Marcos out through the Wimberley Valley. So one of the most beautiful areas a person could represent, and also is one that's worth protecting. And we're hoping that we can show you some of our ideas on conservation development that we hope will incentivize conservation development and allow us to maintain our natural resources as we continue to experience this explosive growth. I know that most of you know Central Texas is one of the fastest growing areas in our country. We believe people want to live here because of great opportunities for them and their families, but also because of the beauty that surrounds us here in the Hill Country. And we want to do everything we can to make sure that we maintain that, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. So again, thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to your feedback.
Thank you, Commissioner Lon Shell. Next is Mark Kennedy.
Hello, I'm Mark Kennedy. I'm General Counsel for Hays County and have been in this role for over 14 years now. In this role, I advise regarding issues of development and subdivision, which of course in a high growth county has been an issue that we've dealt with since before I arrived here. And then additionally, we out of my office handle property issues, including conservation easements and conservation development. So I'm happy to see that the issue of subdivisions and development and the issue of conservation can find some common ground, which is what we're addressing today.
Thank you, Mark. Up next is Catherine Romans.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the folks from Hays County inviting me in to join their panel, and a special thanks to the Texas Land Trust Council for pulling this all together today. My name is Catherine Romans. I'm the Executive Director of the Hill Country Alliance. We are a nonprofit organization. We work across 17 counties of Central Texas, and we are particularly excited whenever we have the chance to partner with a county like Hays County to really practice those visioning exercises of how we can spotlight conservation of natural resources as we grow. So it's been particularly exciting for us to work with such a forward-thinking county and really try to spread the good work that's happening in Hays County to other parts of the Hill Country and the state of Texas. So I'm excited to learn more with all of you and participate in this presentation.
Thank you, Catherine. Also on the presentation, we have Alexandra Thompson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandra. I am the Hays County Natural Resources Coordinator, and I'm really excited to be a part of this. I think that the county is going to be able to achieve some really awesome goals to make sure that hopefully it doesn't look too different compared to, the reason why everybody's moving here and all the growth happening in Central Texas. We can keep the beauty and ecosystem services available for future generations. So I'm really fortunate to be a part of this process and excited to see the end goal.
Thanks, Alex. And lastly, my name is Marcus Pacheco. I'm interim director of our Hays County Development Services Department. In my role, I oversee all development regulations and enforcement of development regulations, as well as see development plans and subdivision plans coming in every day, every year. And conservation efforts is something that is really an item and an important factor that the county, especially Hays County, needs to address going into the future, with the county growing as fast as we are. So discussing key items from the program that Commissioner Schell mentioned, and also discussing key aspects of the Parks and Open Space Bond that our county was just awarded this past year. Will kind of are the main two emphasis of this presentation that we want to share with you all that are attending this presentation through the Texas Land Conservation Conference. And we hope you enjoy what we have to say, our thoughts, our experiences, and we will now continue. So with that being said, I think the very first item to start on will be development in Hays County, more particular population and growth demands. As mentioned in the video and as mentioned by the numerous other panelists on this presentation, growth is a big aspect that we are currently trying to deal with in the county. Hays County is one of the fastest growing counties in the area, in the state, in the nation. And as a result, with that growth demand, population is right there along with it, and future development demands, sorry about that, are of the essence and at an all-time high. So with no trend towards this demand slowing down, planning for the future is of the essence. As you can see, some of the statistics there on the slide. In 2015, there was an approximate number of 172,419 residents in Hays County. That number is projected to increase with a forecasted trend of upwards of 200% increase by 2045. The estimated population in 2045 is estimated to be around 633,000 residents living in Hays County, which is crazy to think, but is not unfathomable. So furthermore, as well, as you can see on that, right next to those numbers, you'll see a map showing the county and showing current growth areas that the county is experiencing today. What you'll notice is that there is higher growth areas in the eastern portion of Hays County. That's where we see a lot of our higher population density areas. But we can also see that there are areas that are stemming out going into western portions of Hays County. On top, the main item to note from that is in looking at growth areas highlighted in that orange shade, you will also notice the conserved land currently existing in Hays County. So when you take a look at the conserved land overlaying growth areas, you can see the large disparity between population growth clusters and areas of conserved land as parkland and open space, and how it is important for us to start planning more towards conservation of those areas. Just one key number also to throw out there is that in Hays County currently is approximately 434,000 acres. And out of those 434,000 acres, only 30,000 are currently existing as conserved land, which is that green shade on the map. Stemming from those population statistics and demand statistics, I want to now segue towards development trends. As I mentioned before, I am the interim director of our development services department. I've been with our development services department ever since I've joined the county. And ever since I've joined the county, I've known one type of development model, and that is the conventional subdivision model. It is the more popular model that we see at the county. And there's specific reasons why we see this type of development model. As mentioned numerous times, the growth of the demand of population and development demand stems to have developers and property owners are submitting plans daily to meet that demand. And those plans are either development plans, subdivision plans, preliminary plans. The county is seeing a large increase in these plans coming to us, not only the county, but also our municipalities. This demand is due to meet the demands of the population growth. The conventional subdivision model is a more dense type of model, which has less open space. The high demand for homes, larger lots, and apartments is typically associated with this type of subdivision model. As a result, conservation efforts and conservation practices such as open space, parkland areas, and other types of conservation features such as easements and greenlands and items of that note are impacted and not fully developed or not fully attended to. Currently, based on our regulations, the parkland and open space requirements for a conventional subdivision model or a conventional subdivision application, our regulations require typically a rate of 2% per provisions for parkland and open space. And as a result, we typically see only the 2% criteria being met for many of these conventional subdivision models. And so with stemming back to that map that I showed you last slide, that growth area is growing more and increasing in size, whereas the green polygons aren't as necessarily growing in size, and they can equate to our current practices and the current trends we're seeing, where more homes, lots, and road improvements are being built and less areas are being conserved for conservation.
Marcus, if I could jump in here.
Yes, Mark.
I think that one of the struggles we have had with growth is that we developers really operate in much the same way across the county and probably across the state and the nation. They want a rule book, for one, and then they're really interested in their bottom line. They're in the business to make money.
Right.
And the struggle we've had is that they look at the county as a regulatory body. And what we're trying to do is engage them on another level with conservation developments, where we work with them and in tandem with them to protect that bottom line and still give them put them in a position to make money in their business, but then give them a flexible rule book that gives us the ability to enhance our ability to conserve property in the county. That's a difficult equation.
I 100% agree, and thank you for those remarks. That highlights our struggle that we are experiencing today. So yes, thank you for that information. Segueing from development trends, we'll now go into the current conservation development guidelines that we have to this day. Though our current guidelines were founded and established with our current county development regulations. And then the similar model that is still preached today was incorporated back then, that it encouraged preservation and promotion for more efficient forms of development, being conservation developments. Our current guidelines for conservation developments, it does lay out a very thorough process, and it does have several, key design requirements and regulations for conservation development. But one of the struggles that we currently are having, as Mr. Kennedy highlighted in his comment, is that some of getting people to do conservation easements is becoming more of a struggle when we don't have current incentives or no other, or at least on a broad spectrum, and they're not promoted or shown to developers. And if that's not the case, then the bottom dollar is going to be more important than establishing home sites and getting more homes rather than conserved areas. So there is a limitation currently that we are having and experiencing when it comes to conservation development. We'd like to see more of it, but the way our regulations currently exist, this is not equated to that uptick in developers wanting to conserve with the county. From here, just from that brief background on the history thus far of Hays County and conservation development, I'd like to discuss some ideal plans for future development. With this future development plans, we want to have more of an emphasis, at least the county wants to have more of an emphasis on conservation developments and also context style developments. The next slide will kind of highlight and go over the differences between the two in comparison with the conventional subdivision model or conventional development model, I should say. County hopes to get more involvement and cooperation to have developers and owners and whom else participate in those types of developments through incentives and promoting incentives. So that's one way that initially with county research, and also help with stakeholders or some consultants and also project team partners on creating incentives and promoting incentives and other ideas, and to get more efforts and more developers to do conservation style developments. We'll highlight what those incentives are and some of the criteria to get to those incentives later in the presentation. But I would now like to segue to Alexander Thompson, who will highlight some of the preservation of the natural resources that will go along with ideal plans for future development. So Alex, if you wouldn't mind talking about some of those natural resources and the importance of them, why we want to preserve them, and maybe how we can preserve them with conservation developments?
Sure. So as I mentioned in my introduction, we understand the mass amount of growth and development happening within Central Texas. And so in Hays County, we're just striving to accommodate that growth, but in a sustainable way, so we don't lose the character and ambiance of what makes Hays County, and the natural beauty and the ecosystem services that go along with that landscape and natural resources. And not everybody necessarily sees how it affects them on their, with their day-to-day lives, but it really does. And so just, part of what we're going to be doing is doing a lot of education and outreach with the public so that they have a better understanding of those ecosystem services. Just to start off, we have water quality and the way that the CSD project can provide opportunities to protect the water quality in streams, creeks, rivers, and spring flows, by preserving the existing natural green infrastructure, which, doesn't have to do anything to it, naturally filters stormwater before reaching those surface water features, and the water before it enters into the aquifers, through sensitive karst features. And water quantity, there's currently a large dependence on groundwater by the residents within the western portions of Hays County. And so naturally, with the increase in growth, there will also be an increase in stressors on the aquifer and water table. So a really exciting component of the CSD efforts is that the county's team has been working on ways to incorporate incentivizing developers to include alternative water supplies and gray water reuse infrastructure designed into the homes and the neighborhoods that they're building from the get-go, rather than individual homeowners having to, cover that expense to basically convert their home into having those types of systems. And, the county also has a regional habitat conservation plan, and we have goals related to that as well. But it overlaps with this, and that by protecting the more open space and greenways and connecting features and paths with other trail projects, the CSD design creates opportunities to protect the terrestrial, aquatic species, karst species, and then again provide wildlife corridors. And then there's actually endangered species that reside within Hays County that not everybody is aware of. And, partially our regional habitat conservation plan is, designed to protect endangered species, one in particular, the golden cheek warbler, as well as some other sensitive species within the county that currently exist and call it its home as well, or their home as well. And so, the CSD design will not only assist with protecting these ecosystem services, but also protect wildlife and other goals the county has. And additionally, inherently by protecting natural infrastructure and preserving the riparian buffer zones, it'll also help lessen the potential contributing stormwater sheet flow that could occur during large rain events, by potential opportunities for impervious cover to be developed near, creeks and rivers, and basically instilling that natural green infrastructure is kept in place instead of contributing to a higher flow for storm during rain events for downstream residents, will also be accomplished through the CSD design.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Alex, for that key and valuable information on why the preservation of natural resources is imperative and can go hand with conservation subdivision developments and implementation and plans moving forward for the future to have more developments, and how natural resource preservation will be a key aspect that goes along with implementing more of those development types. The next page here will also highlight the different types of subdivisions that I mentioned before. The conventional subdivision model is what we described, and what a lot of us are, a lot of you probably that are watching this presentation are accustomed to, where you have you're maximizing total number of house lots and to maximize profit. And I won't go through each one of those bullet points or those descriptors there. they're there for everyone to read. But I want to highlight the two other, the column in the middle and the column on the far right as context subdivision, sensitive subdivisions and conservation subdivisions, pardon me, as the two types of subdivisions that the county, with incentives that will be discussed and highlighted per our CSD program later on the presentation. But the two types of subdivisions that the county would like to strive towards in the future. Context subdivision is best described as, more conservation minded than conventional developments. It's pedestrian oriented, and you can kind of envision it as having a small house lots as a clustered type of system closer together. Whereas conservation subdivision is, we are maximizing all total acreage of contiguous conserved land, where we have small house lots and high residential density and diversity. With both types of models, we are still achieving the same. One of the big common goals, which is to minimize land disturbance compared to the conventional subdivision, where land disturbance is at a maximum. So those are the three different types that we have discussed, and we typically see at the county when it comes in terms of development as a whole. And like I mentioned before, the county is moving forward more towards context sensitive subdivisions and conservation subdivisions with the help through our updated CSD program. So with that being said, I would like to now discuss some of those conservation tools and incentives that our CSD program that the county is working with the project team to craft and formulate in the program thus far. So we've mentioned this numerous times. Hayes County wants to encourage and incentivize conservation development, trying to find innovative ways to make conservation development viable and more attractive and more in demand. One of the initial thoughts that has come up, and it seems to be a key item that we can implement and use moving forward, is a menu of options. We'll describe more in detail what the menu of options entails and what it looks like on the next slide, but it allows developers and landowners to kind of follow a path and follow a structure on how they can apply certain aspects for their conservation development. From there, incentives the county can offer for developers for conservation development would then be granted based on how said development meets certain criteria and certain prerequisites based on this menu of options. To kind of go over the menu of options, I'd like to ask Alexander Thompson and Commissioner Schell to provide any input that they have had or any of their experience working with the CSD program and the project team on some of these items that we will now take a look at.
Marcus. Yeah, I think, as everybody's seen, the question is, how do we get developers to change their mindset? How do we show them that you can create the same value for your development by conserving, hopefully, 50% or more of the developable land? That's one of our goals for conservation subdivisions, is a 50% or more conservation. You'll see a heavy weight on rainwater. We obviously, Western Hayes County, the challenges in groundwater. We understand that development is occurring on the backs of groundwater. Not only is groundwater going to be stressed in the future, but it's already currently stressed at our current population. So you'll see that we've tried to create several criteria and several categories in which you score points. And then when you add the points up, you can qualify for different levels of incentives. And some of the basic incentives could be just rapid processing of permits, maybe coordination with other jurisdictions, things like that we will help you get to that point faster. As you get into some of the higher scoring areas and higher levels of incentives, we could even talk about public improvement districts, funding of public infrastructure, sales tax rebate, which we commonly don't do for residential subdivisions, but I think we could make some arguments that for certain developments, if they were willing to meet the majority of these criteria, that we could open ourselves up to some more innovative ways to try to incentivize. We also hope that we can just show an equation to the developer to see that building less roads, less investment in that type of infrastructure will also save them money. And I believe one of the things that we're going to find is, possibly the game changer is that, especially here in Hayes County, I believe this is a type of product that will be in demand. I think we'll find that someone that's moving to Western Hayes County is moving there for a reason. They want to experience nature. They want to have open spaces. They want to be guaranteed that they don't invest in their property and the next day someone builds a house 2 feet from them on the other side of the fence. And I think we can show through this model that we will create a demand, and that market will be very lucrative, possibly for our developers. And I think if you're going to find folks that are moving here that want to experience the hill country and want to live in it and want to protect their views and the natural resources and have places where they can hike and bike and take their children out to nature, this is going to be something that they'll want to do. And so I think it's not just about the incentives, though that's a big key, but it's also about changing the way people think about how we develop and making sure they understand that the benefits of these type of developments, not just for them, not just for our environment, but also for our quality of life and the families that want to live here.
Thank you, Commissioner, and that was very well versed and well put on how these incentives in this program can kind of be a benefit and sort of, I guess, a win-win for everyone involved, the county developer, current residents and future residents that are going to be moving to the county. How the menu and the incentives and some of the items that are described in this process checks all the boxes and goals for the county and our constituents here in the county moving forward. So I really appreciate that information and that advice that you did share with us. Real brief, I'll now briefly discuss, and we can just quickly look over some of these possible incentives that can be implemented for developments should they participate in the conservation development program based on that menu of options that we discussed. The way it's crafted would be that based on the menu and based on some of the prerequisites and criteria that you applied for, you could meet, you would then be granted points or some sort of scoring system, which would then classify you in three or different tiers that would then from those tiers have different associated incentives associated with those tiers. Commissioner Shell pointed out several as incentives already in his discussion, but you can kind of see how those tiers can be structured, where the county may sort of view certain tiers being on the higher end versus the lower end of things. Either way, it formulates and helps the conversation and the idea of more conservation development becoming concrete and more achievable in the county. So real quick recap. The main goal from the menu of options that we discussed would be to help developers and qualify for certain incentives, and also address an area designated as a goal for the county conservation initiative. I think Alex mentioned a few items, and also the Commissioner Shell, but some of the goals that would be achieved and can be included in this program would be the reduction in impervious cover, open space, water recapture and reuse, water quality and conservation, floodplain stream buffer protection, wildlife habitat protection, historical preservation, and recreation enhancement. Those are all items that are desirable by the county and residents and future residents that we all see as viable goals that will enrich our future development plans. Alex and Commissioner Shell, just real quick before I move on to the next piece of the conversation, is there anything else we wanted to add as far as the conservation program and menu of options and some of the incentives? Or I think we kind of addressed all the key aspects.
That's great, Marcus. And I know soon we're going to move into talking about our parks and open space bond, which I think also opens up some opportunities for incentives that the county will have funds for conservation easements. And so we could see some of these larger subdivisions that have large amounts of acreage in conservation, especially if they would qualify for our habitat conservation plan. We could see further investment of the county and the public into those conservation areas that would help offset the cost for that developer of not developing that portion of their land. So I'm looking forward to getting to that parks and open space bond section.
Yes,
yeah, and as we transition, this might be a good just call out. I'm sure we've got some land trust staff and board members in the audience, as well as hopefully some city and county officials from around the state. But thinking about how you involve the land trust community specifically in partnering with your county commissioners court, your local city government to really think about driving these ideas in your own communities, talking about how to get in front of builders and building conservation easements into new growth is a really exciting kind of idea.
Yes, Catherine, that is a very good key sound of advice, and we do encourage everyone watching, all members and from different facets of development and government and different types of councils to take note of that moving forward. From here, one item we would like to kind of just convey, and we kind of will go over this on a very preliminary basis, is applying some of the menu items that we just discussed from the conservation development program to sort of real world conditions. So we, in our program that we're working with the Hayes County project team, a planning study was conducted. The video did mention, highlighted that briefly, where there was a project site in the county, and that project site had existing regulations and proposed modifications applied to kind of study how this can work in the real world. Just note that these are purely illustrative and they're not actual or approved plans. And just for the sake of time, I will kind of just go over these in just a very brief form and fashion. If you do have any, you want more specific information, or you have more specific questions on the process, how the study was conducted, you can reach out to the members of the project team, and we can get you some key facts and information, and can kind of share with you the experience that we had in conducting this charrette in this study, and that can maybe help your plans going forward. So I will briefly kind of go over the process of the test property. There is shown on the screen. You can kind of see the site details on one of the sites that was selected for the study, and you can see how 3 different scenarios were applied to this test site. The 3 different scenarios being the 3 different types of subdivision development models that we've already discussed in the presentation. So with that, with going over this test site, the main priority areas that we focused on were the floodplain from Plum Creek, some of the areas that had steep slopes, and then some of the soil in the area being prime farmland soil. So those are areas that the team conducting the study focused and tried to craft some of the incentives and to make those areas more conserved rather than conventional subdivision models. So I'll just briefly kind of go over, just a general, you can kind of see how the property would be developed from a conventional subdivision model. In this conventional subdivision model, there are 357 acres of the total 422 acres developed. Of that 357, there's 232 open space acres, and this is more. And in this, the lot yield was upwards of approximately 2,100 lots. So this is your more demanding type of model that demands more homes, more lots, more road improvements versus conservation practices.
Marcus, I'll just add that this is actually a real development that was conceptualized. We did not make this up. This is something that's really potentially proposed in the county, correct?
Yes, Mark, thank you for highlighting that. This is something that is an actual planned development that has gone several different plans, and they were kindly enough allowed us to use their studies and their models during our internal charrette for our conservation development program. Thank you for pointing that out. The next model is a contact subdivision model. As you can see, how it changed from the conventional subdivision model, where out of the 232 open space acres, it bumped up to 330 open space acres. You see more of the area around the Plum Creek River Plum Creek was conserved as open space and conservation areas, and the total lot yield wasn't too far off. It was still around that 2,100 approximate total lot yield count, but less single family residential, more multifamily residential types of development. But however, we did have more open space land compared to the previous model. And lastly, the conservation subdivision model. This is, like we discussed in the past, our more stricter approach to have more areas designated as conservation areas and open space. And this is the model that has significantly less lot yield, more open space percentage, less road improvements, and more conservation friendly practices. With that being said, you can kind of see the comparison between the three, where you have your conventional subdivision model have that higher lot yield count and compared to the other two, and also the open space percentage being increased as conservation land for the conservation subdivision. Also, you can see how infrastructure costs went down due to the less requirement for road improvements. And then you can see how that would be attributed across each lot that was part of the development. So just the main key takeaways from the different types of studies and also the overall program that with the menu of options is that the big takeaway was conservation development is viable in the county, and that's across the board. That's not just for a specific group or just the residents. It's for residents, target groups, specific study groups, developers that are familiar with the county or developers that are coming to the county from any outside area or another state, or that conservation development is viable. How we get there, it's going to take some legwork, but we feel that the studies we've done and some of the information we share with you today can kind of enlighten on how we plan to get there. Our rules and regulations on conservation will need to be updated to include some of those items, such as the incentives and the menu of options process. But we feel once we do that, it'll be a win-win, like I mentioned, for all involved. So with that, also, another big key takeaway is that floodplain consideration for conservation open space, the county being more amenable to having floodplain, not wholly contained, but allowing a certain percentage of floodplain being considered for conservation open space, which would then lead to more context-sensitive subdivision developments being more a realistic approach. We know it may be more difficult to get from A to Z, so by having a context-sensitive development such as that middle option being a more realistic approach, the county's still getting more greener designs and conservation-friendly developments compared to our current state of where we're getting little to none. So that's some of the key takeaways that we experienced thus far in the program. Alex and Commissioner Shell or anyone else that want to comment on any other takeaway that I may have missed briefly?
I think one thing it's good to point out too is, the example we showed was something that would be on the eastern side of our county. And, I represent the western part of the county. And so sometimes my focus or perspective is towards that area. But this is something that can be applied across the county. Obviously, high growth area along the corridor, just as important to conserve some of those open spaces, especially for floodplain management reasons and flood mitigation efforts. So I think a good key takeaway is this isn't just for the western part of the county. This can be applied anywhere in the county. And one of the reasons we think we can create a model that will work across Texas. So all of those demands that happen when that corridor area grows on water supplies, if we can reduce and mitigate some of those, I think that we can show that anywhere development occurs, we can find ways to do it in a conservation style, which will be beneficial to the residents and the public in general.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, that is a very key, important item to mention that this can be applied across the different types of areas that one may have in their county. At Hayes County, we have one county, but eastern and western portions are somewhat the same and also very different. So that is very, very good information to add. From there,
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I just kind of wanted to add on to that with natural resources and ecosystem services. I know that previously I also mentioned kind of majority of everything that I talked about was on the western side, and the landscape and hydrogeology associated with that, those key features over there. But on the eastern side, there's also the Blackland prairies, uh, wildflower meadows. That's what I meant, for pollinator species, and how important that is to to plant life and agriculture. And that's also something that's really important ecologically, that we can provide a lot more information to spread awareness, for people who are moving here from other cities, other states, who may not necessarily know. They've probably seen pictures, and maybe they'll see the bluebonnets along certain parts of the highways and other properties as part of the charm of Central Texas. But that's going to be part of the education and outreach as well. Just not only just CSD and the Parks and Open Space Bond, but you know, ecologically, just to learn about the place where they live is going to be really important. And then again, with the Parks and Open Space Bond, with all the growth that's happening on the east side, it'll be really important to incorporate trails and parks for the community, for recreation and family time. And so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Alex. We appreciate those comments, and yeah, those areas of importance that can be universally, applied from the western portion of the county to the eastern portion of the county. So, thank you for that information. Next, is the discussion on the Parks and Open Space Bond. So, the Parks and Open Space Bond in November 2020, the citizens of Hays County voted to approve the bond. The bond will go to the creation to help fund new and existing parks, and also or help fund the creation of new parks and restoration of existing parks, trails, open space over the next decade plus in Hays County. An open space, Parks and Open Space Advisory Committee was formed to help facilitate with identifying, some key projects that would help receive possible funding from the bond. So to kind of discuss that bond process further, I would like to invite Commissioner Shell, Mark Kennedy, and also Alexander Thompson to kind of discuss the process of how we got to approving the bond, some of the other items that went along with that, outside of just the general statements shown on this presentation, and just maybe some experiences or some other key information we can share in this presentation with the process.
Thanks, Marcus. And also like Catherine to chime in too, because there was a big role played by the community as a whole. And I think Catherine can share some of the help that was provided to us when we were preparing for this, and which we spent about a year preparing for. And you mentioned the Parks and Open Space Advisory Commission. We believed it was imperative that we have our citizens involved in a transparent way so that our voters would know exactly what was being asked for them, the type of commitment, the type of investment that we were asking them to consider for their future generations. So we thought it was very successful. The bond passed by 70% to 30% margin. So as you can see, it was widely supported across this county, and in all areas of the county supported the bond. So we're extremely excited about that. I think that means that these efforts that we're making are well received, and people understand the importance of conservation and investing in our open space so that we can maintain those values that we have. Alexander worked on the POSAC, developing the list of projects, and Mr. Kennedy can explain any of the bond questions. If anybody has, feel free to enter those into the question and answer chat box, and Mr. Kennedy will answer those. But Catherine, do you have any input maybe on how the Parks Bond went and some of the roles that were played by others in our community?
Yeah, well, I just want to kind of reiterate, this has been a nice broad conversation where we started with the county really laying out its vision and setting some goals for what it wants development and growth to look like through conservation development. And this bond represents a real investment in putting publicly funded dollars into conservation. So it's been a really exciting process, and I would like to think wouldn't have been possible without the support of the land trust community that's really active in Hays County. Organizations like mine, the Hill Country Alliance, that are more focused on broad education and outreach and policy tools to incentivize the conservation of natural resources. And then, of course, across both of these programs, the conservation development program that Hays County is working on now, and the Parks and Open Space Advisory Commission, and of course the campaign that supported the bond. There were so many partners involved. So if you're interested in learning more, talking to GAP Strategies, who's helping with the conservation development rules and regs, talking to Karen Ford with Water PR about her facilitation of the bond and Parks and Open Space process, the Hill Country Alliance, and how we worked with partners like the Hill Country Conservancy and Wimberley Valley Watershed Association to really make sure that we were putting forward good projects that are going to be able to not only use that $75 million that the voters approved, but leverage many more times that to really maximize the benefit for current and future Hays County residents, while minimizing the overall burden on today's taxpayers. So we have been looking at this as a model that we'd like to replicate across the Hill Country. And it's been the leadership of the county and Commissioner Shell and his colleagues on the court who have really made it possible. So thank you to Commissioner Shell and the wonderful staff at Hayes County for really putting a strong investment behind that vision that we kind of led with in this conversation.
Thanks, Catherine. I appreciate all the help that you gave us and your organization, instrumental in getting this passed and giving people the right information so they can make the best decision for them and their families. And we're really excited to get rolling on this. The POSAC is back to meeting now, and they'll start reviewing those project lists, developing some additional projects, and hopefully get started this summer on getting some of those on the ground. And kind of one of the things I said before, hopefully there'll be some opportunities in development for us to provide conservation dollars for large setbacks of conservation lands. I think that can be another thing that we can see that we can leverage this bond, not just to have parks and open space for recreation and the benefit of the public, but we also can offset some of that development as well with these dollars.
I'll just add that I appreciated the work that Catherine and the other land trusts did in advance of the bond passing. It's important that everyone understands fully their role that they're playing in the context of a bond proposition. The county is not allowed to advocate for or against a measure. We can't use county resources to advocate for or against a measure that's on a ballot, but we can provide information. Others, on the other hand, who very much care about the goals of this bond proposition are free to get out and do that. And understanding those roles and working with those people, but then keeping in our own lanes is really important. And I think we did a very good job of that.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Mark, and one where it's worth emphasizing if you are, in the audience thinking of your role in as a land trust, that there is a lot that we as nonprofits can do to support these kinds of initiatives while not crossing over any thresholds about, advocacy and 501c3 rules. We raised money to support a campaign. We did some broad just education, informing voters, what was on the ballot, informing voters of when and how that they could vote. There was a lot that we were able to do kind of behind the scenes in just a supportive role, doing some polling to understand what the appetite was for public funding for conservation, particularly during a pandemic. There were a lot of questions about whether there would be support for this sort of initiative given economic uncertainty. I think what we've seen time and time again across Texas and across the country really is that voters understand the importance of protecting land for both recreation and for protecting natural resources. So again, if you are thinking about how this relates to your own community, go start having those conversations with county commissioners and city council members. Find your Mark Kennedy, who is on staff and can help kind of chart a course for how you could start this sort of initiative in your own backyard.
Great. Thank you all for that very valuable information and expert analysis on the process. Catherine, thank you for your contributions and all your information with the process that goes to get this, because it is a lot of legwork and it is a lot of effort, and it takes the right people and the right amount of effort and dedication to get this going from start to finish. So we really appreciate your time and your input and your help with this along the way. So I think that puts a nice feather in the cap on the bond process. I'm sure you all are watching the presentation. There's plenty of questions, concerns, comments. Please feel free to ask those. We'll get to those as soon as they come in. And this isn't the only time. If you do have any future questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Catherine, Mark, Commissioner Shell, myself, Alex, when it comes to the bond process. We will gladly be able to share our input and share our thoughts and the experience we've gone through.
Yeah, I will go ahead and drop my email address in the chat just in case anyone's interested.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. So with that being said, Um, Segueing to the last piece on closing thoughts, just overall experience working on the plan, the Parks and Open Space Bond. If anyone would like to contribute, just their brief summary, a brief summary of what their experience and their thoughts on that, what we're looking forward to in the county, and then also the attendees, make sure any questions you may have to enter those in the Q&A chat box. So I'll open it up to all of our speakers. Any closing thoughts?
Thanks, Marcus. I know we're getting close to lunchtime here. Just wanted to welcome feedback from everybody and also their ideas. I'm looking for ideas. Everybody's got a different perspective and a different view, but I'd love to hear from folks of what they think some incentives might be, or some authorities that could be involved with counties or cities that may help us encourage this type of development. So I just encourage everybody to start thinking about this, and please, if you don't mind, share me that feedback so that we can work with our partners across the state and try to find creative ways that we can achieve the goals that we have for conservation, subdivision development. And appreciate everybody being here today, and everybody on the panel, and Marcus and Catherine, thanks for joining us, and just look forward to hearing everybody's questions.
Well, I might just end with, so often in Texas, it feels like we have so few tools to plan for and manage growth, particularly at the county level. And I know this is not unique to the Hill Country, although it does feel like we have a particular challenge in the Hill Country with the rate of growth. And I just think both of these initiatives, the conservation development planning, as well as the investment in the form of a Parks and Open Space Bond, represent ways that the county can really affirmatively and proactively plan for and try to guide growth in a way that is going to be beneficial for our long-term economic and environmental health. So just want to again commend the county and thank you all for having me as a part of this. It's been a pleasure working with y'all, and would be happy to share any further insights with the audience.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Commissioner Show. And thank you everyone for attending this presentation. We hope you enjoyed the valuable information and expertise everyone involved with this presentation was shared and contributed to. We hope you enjoy the rest of your conference, and we will now be going into a lunch break. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the conference.